Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better, and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach, always available too at carolthecoach.com.
And welcome to the show. Hi there. You are listening to Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and I am Carol Jorgensen-Sheets, a.k.a. Carol the Coach. And this is the only show to my knowledge that is dedicated to sexual addiction. So if you're listening for the first time or if you're a return listener, welcome back. We are here every Monday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm getting more and more emails than you can imagine. This topic is a little tough for a lot of people to feel they can call in. But if you have the guts to call me and ask me questions, I want to assure you it is anonymous. I won't use your real name. I will not repeat your phone number that you're calling from. And that number to call me is 646-595-3284. Again, put this in your phone. Boy, you can tell I went to Charlotte, North Carolina. Did you hear me? I go, again, listen to the call-in number, which is 646-595-3284. And you can call me anytime during this hour. I know a lot of you listen because you download it on iTunes, and so you may not be hearing it live right now. But for anybody who is listening to it live, I encourage you, if you have a question about your own behavior, if you have a question about somebody you love, this is the show where you'll get your questions answered. I'm a certified sexual addictions counselor. I'm a life coach. I'm a psychotherapist of 33 years, and I'm here to make your life a little bit easier. You know, this is a tough subject, and people don't know where to turn. They don't know what to think. So I'm so thrilled that you can go to iTunes and download the show just by listening to www.blogtalkradio.com/Sex Help with Carol the Coach. Well, listen, we're going to be talking about what do you do when you're involved in a sexual addictions group. But in the meantime, I got to tell you that I got a fascinating email from somebody who I encouraged him to call the show. He may call in the next couple of weeks. We are on different time zones. That's one of the most beautiful things about this radio show is you can be listening all over the world. But he actually works nights. He's on a totally different time zone. And if he can make it, boy, we'd love to have him. But in the meantime, he sent me this email. And it said, "Hey, Carol, I'd like to say thank you for your show. I found it last night and have just finished listening to my first episode. My name is Tom, and I'm 38 years old, and I've been involved in secret sexual behavior since I was a small child." Okay, Tom, you are not that different from anybody else. Most addicts got involved with secret sexual behavior early on in their childhoods. As a matter of fact, one of the exercises I give my clients, or we're doing it right now in my men's group, is I ask them to timeline out age 0 to 17 what occurred in their life that was either traumatic or that they kept secret or that involved some sort of sexual behavior. So I'm not surprised, Tom, that you actually have been indulging in this behavior since you were very, very young. He says, listening to your message, I believe that I am reliving trauma as a child. When I was 8 years old, I had an encounter with an older man in a public toilet. So obviously, when he was 8 years old, it sounds like he had been molested by somebody in a public bathroom. And he says, now I find myself wanting to visit these public bathrooms in the hope of another encounter. Now, to the normal person, you might say, if you've been traumatized and if you've been molested in a bathroom, I would think you might avoid bathroom situations that were public. But in actuality, one of the things we know about a lot of the people that are reliving trauma is that they fixate on the person, place, or thing that occurred to them. And they have such mixed feelings about it that they begin to obsess and it becomes compulsive, and they go back to, one, figure out, is this a safe situation? And two, because they've got almost a brain lock for the actual encounter that happened, and they try to relive it over and over and over again. Okay, if something like this has happened to you, again, you can call me at 646-595-3284. In the meantime, he says, now I find myself wanting to visit these bathrooms in hope of an encounter. I know the anticipation and feelings of excitement and risk are the driving feelings when I'm active. I don't find men attractive. I just find them available. Pornography is a problem for me as, let's see here. I'm so sorry. I just lost my place. Pornography is a problem for me as well. I developed a speech impediment around the same age, so when I went to secondary school, I was ridiculed and bullied. This led me to self-medicate to my father's porn collection at an early age. It became a daily routine at age 13 when I first experienced orgasm. I would come home from school at lunchtime when the house was empty, and I would spend my lunch hour watching porn instead of eating. Okay, so already this young boy from the ages of about 8 to 13 developed a routine whereby he actually would use masturbation as a way to self-soothe his anxieties. And in addition, he didn't really feel good about himself, and so as a result, what did he end up doing? He would self-medicate his anxieties and fears. Then, of course, the speech impediment further compounded the low self-esteem he felt. You know, what we know about people that have sexual addiction is that typically they didn't feel good enough as a child, and they used masturbation, looking at porn, frequent sexual activity as a way not only to self-soothe but to bolster themselves up. So here he is, and he's 13, and he's coming home every day from school at lunchtime when the house was empty, and he would spend his lunch hour watching porn instead of eating. This is also a time that he experienced his first orgasm, so there was a lot of pleasure associated to this sexually secret behavior. I like that word secret. It sounds better than deviant. And, you know, we never necessarily want to make somebody feel bad about themselves. That doesn't do any good. So now he says, you know, I'm married with 3 children. I confessed to my wife about 4 years ago that I was fixated on public toilets and meeting men. She was, as you can imagine, devastated, and our relationship has been a roller coaster ride since then. Now, I have to tell you that I really admire the fact that this man was honest. Unfortunately, for anybody who's contemplating being honest with their wife or husband, I would also encourage you to seek professional help before you do it, for two reasons. One is there's a specific way to do it that will be less traumatizing to your partner. And a disclosure, or a full disclosure as we call it in our business, requires a lot of preparation, a lot of safety, and a lot of security and support. If you for whatever reason just share that information and that person is not sufficiently supported, you can really you can traumatize your partner, and that then makes you feel even worse. So although he did the right thing by talking to her, he probably didn't have the right setup, and therefore she's really traumatized. She's probably wondering what in the heck's going on. You know, I work with a lot of partners whose husbands are, they've been engaged in prostitution or cross-dressing or transvestite sex, and they're like, who did I marry? What is this all about? And they feel betrayed. They feel like they've lived an illusion because they never knew that this secret behavior was going on. And so I really encourage you to get a book by Jennifer Schneider or Deb Corley called, it's something, let me think, what is it called? It's about disclosures. And it's an excellent workbook. I think it's Disclosing Secrets, the process of disclosures. I've got it at my other office, but it's definitely, the authors are Deb Corley and Jennifer Schneider. They've done a fabulous job with that book. So I really would. You can get that on Amazon.com, or you can go to my favorite publisher, GentlePath.com, because they're just so wonderful. This is their niche, and any kind of addiction, and so they really support education. So as this man said, as Tom said, his relationship has been a roller coaster ride ever since. He says, I've tried to pick myself up so many times, but I always fall back into it. Now, because this man's from another country, he speaks a little bit differently. When he says, I've tried to pick myself up so many times, what he really means is I've tried to stop the behavior, and he hasn't known how to do that. Last month, my wife found a text to an accountability partner describing how close I had gotten to an encounter. I had visited the house of a previous encounter, but thanks to God, he was not home. My wife called our marriage off. Then, as she could not believe that after all we have been through, I could still decide to go there. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. With technology being so prevalent, spouses are able, so easily and readily able to find out information. And, this woman obviously was looking at Tom's text messages, and I'm so thankful that Tom had this accountability partner. It sounds like Tom really wants to work on this issue. He's got several things set in place, but he doesn't have the whole action plan set up. More than likely, if I were working with Tom, I would recommend that he go into treatment because he's got some real childhood issues that he has to work out. And certainly his wife is now very, very traumatized. Now, he states that they are still together. After we got back together, I decided that I would have to do things differently. We decided as a couple that there would be no more secrets. Good job, Tom. So since then, I have been upfront about my feelings and struggles on a daily basis. This helped as I felt supported and that my wife was on my side. That was until last Friday. The day before I received news at work that the company I worked for was going into administrative and may close at any time, I found myself masturbating on the Friday at work. I was disappointed but kept the positive that it had been 3.5 weeks since I had last done that. Now, for any of my listeners, you may say, well, what's the big deal about masturbation? You know, for some people, masturbation is natural and normal and necessary. For other people, it is an activity that predisposes sex. But for addicts, oftentimes masturbation starts that ritualized cycle of sexual addiction. And so for a lot of men, they can't masturbate because if they do, it starts the process of their addiction. So I suspect for Tom, although he didn't say that he had actually felt that masturbation was a precursor to his addiction. And the stress of finding out that his company had closed was reason enough for him to go and masturbate on that Friday at work. Now, in the field of addiction, we always say there will be lots of reasons to act out sexually, but that's no excuse. You know, you shouldn't masturbate because you're excited, because you're worried, because you're angry, because you're scared. You shouldn't masturbate because you haven't masturbated for 3 months. I mean, all those reasons are what would look like acceptable reasons to self-soothe, but to an addict, that is going to start the cycle. So he then says that I kept my resolve, and as soon as I got home, I told my wife what had happened. I expected support, but instead I received abandonment. We are still in the same home, but my wife said that it did not matter how small I thought those actions were that day. I had still chosen to do that despite her feelings about it. She has been angry since then, and when she is angry, she shuts me out. She spends our time alone and hardly speaks to me. I spoke to her today and asked her how she was feeling. She said that she is still angry and asked me to keep my distance. Now, that is so common in households where there's been a violation of the promises that you're practicing in terms of your own sexual recovery. Nothing hurts me more, Tom says, than being kept at a distance from my wife. I constantly feel nervous and sad, and my self-loathing increases because I'm the cause of all my wife's pain. This would normally lead me to delve deeper into my own need for self-medication, but instead I managed to pick myself up, and 1 week on, I'm still going strong and clean. I'm scared, though, as I know that it has never lasted before in the last 4 years of trying to stay clean. I'm looking for a breakthrough that can withstand and keep me focused. And then Tom says, thank you for listening. I will be going through what I missed on the podcast daily as I still feel that I need feeding daily at the moment. Well, Tom is so very right. You know, when you're working on this issue, you need to be doing a variety of things. Unfortunately, going to a good certified sexual addictions therapist isn't enough. Going to a therapist isn't enough. Talking to your minister isn't enough. You need a holistic program that will help you. And so, Tom, what I would recommend is that you get yourself to 12-step meetings. You not only need to learn the 12 steps to help you stay clean and sober, but you need the fellowship of other men that can help you in your own recovery, as well as they've been there, done that. Not only can they teach you a few things, but they can support you, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That is absolutely so important. And the 12 steps are what keeps you clean and sober, as well as you need to do some reading. I highly recommend Facing the Shadows. It's a workbook that will get you started on your own recovery. You're on the right track when you say that you need to listen to my podcast. I have now recorded over 25 podcasts, and they'll give you a lot of education because I interview experts in the field. Next week, I have John and Elaine Leadham, who are absolutely fabulous. They wrote the book One in the Spirit, a meditation guide for recovering couples. And, they are with me probably once every couple of months talking about how couples can recover from this. As you can see in Tom's situation, he is devastated because he's hurting his wife and because she's shutting him out. And, Tom, that is so very common. Or, so oftentimes I work with partners who really micromanage the addict. Not helpful at all to micromanage. But, again, if you're doing your reading and you're doing your praying and you're working your 12 steps and you have a good sponsor and you're seeing a certified sexual addictions therapist, you then are able to work with your accountability partner, create the fellowship you need, and not feel like you're all alone in this important disease. And so I appreciate you writing in. I hope you can call in at some point. That number is 646-595-3284. I know you're in a different country. I don't know what that entails in terms of giving us a call, but I do believe that you'll be able to figure out how you can contact me. And I look forward to your call, whether it be this week, next week, or next month. And thank you for emailing me. Anybody is welcome to email me at carolthecoach@aol.com, or they can go to my website, Sex Help with Carol the Coach, or maybe you've been in some serious recovery and you feel like you're ready to take your life to the next level. My website, which is www.carolthecoach.com, has over 600 blogs that teach you how to use assertiveness and how to resolve conflict and how to improve your self-esteem and ways to rear your children. And I mean, it's just an all-around advice blog for people. You know, I've written manuals. You can go to my website and buy my manuals. They're only $20. They have over 65 exercises where you can actually do the work on yourself. And then you can practice it with your kids and your husband or your wife. It is such an honor to be working with you in all of these capacities. And so I really encourage you to make the most of me. Let me be your very own personal counselor that you work with every Monday night on blogtalkradio.com/sexhelp with Carol the Coach. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about this men's group I'm doing. And I want to talk about some of the exercises. If you were to be involved in a men's group with me, or you find another certified sexual addictions therapist, more than likely, we all run groups. Patrick Carnes says it is absolutely the most essential thing that you can do in helping work through the pain and the suffering from the childhood wounds that have contributed so fully to the trauma. Now, you know, I have said this more than once, that there are really two types of addicts. One kind of has some obsessive-compulsive tendencies. They get into habit disorders, and they've really created some bad habit disorders with pornography that has escalated. You know, the brain is a funny thing. And when you're exposed to lots and lots of pornography over and over again for hours on end, for days and weeks and months and years, the brain craves a greater and greater and greater high. And I have talked to so many men and women that say, you know what, so much of what we see every single day is the same old thing. But what we're trying to recreate is that that incredible high that occurred either the first time we looked at porn or the time we actually found the porn that spoke to us the most. And so it's really the chase, it's the hunt that creates that desire to get on the internet and look for something that will light up the brain, similar to being at a casino and seeing those jackpots light up. You know, when you've won some money in a penny slot machine or a nickel slot machine, and the lights are going and the sounds are blasting and people are watching, it's that same kind of endocrinological high, that dopamine rush that occurs, that people go after over and over and over and over again. So when I'm working with my groups, one of the things we do is a check-in, and that is when you identify how you're feeling right then and there in the moment. Now, I'm going to ask you, as you listen to this show, there are 5 primary feelings, and they are anger, sadness, loneliness, fear, and happiness. And right now, sitting in front of your computer or exercising as you listen to the podcast or whatever, what would you say your primary feeling is? Is it anger, sadness, loneliness, fear, or happiness? Feeling identification is so important for sex addicts because they don't allow themselves to feel. They don't allow themselves to trust, and they don't allow themselves to talk. So how are you feeling right now? As I sit here right now, I'm feeling happy because I am getting to educate and help people. But I got to tell you, right before the show, I was anxious. A couple of shows ago, my computer wasn't working properly. We had some dead air. I emailed Blog Talk. They didn't respond to me. I was mad, and so certainly you've got to be aware of, if you're feeling fearful, that is feeling angry. That's feeling anxious, worried, nervous, afraid, and fearful. If you're feeling anger, maybe you're feeling anger, frustration, maybe you're upset, annoyed, irritated. If you're feeling happy, maybe you're feeling joyful, excited, exuberated, buzzed. If you're feeling sad, you might find that you're feeling depressed or tearful or weepy. If you're feeling lonely, well, you know what loneliness feels like. You may feel isolated, alone. You may feel like there's nobody else that understands what you're going through. Like you're the only one. Well, it's so important to check in every day with your feelings. And again, in our group, we pick the primary feeling. Then, in 5 sentences or less, each group member is to talk about their week. I mean, we've had some incredible group members in the past, and they've talked about their anniversaries or passing the boards or getting a promotion or being fired or losing their health insurance or losing their wife. There's all sorts of dilemmas that occur on a weekly basis to anybody who has a job or who has a family or who gets out there at all. And so you get this 5-sentence check-in to share how your week's going. Then the third part of that check-in is actually an opportunity to talk about what you need to work on for the night. And when you really think about things, where do you get an opportunity to declare and say what you want to work on? It just doesn't happen very often. And so group is an excellent way to say, tonight I want to work on managing my urges and my cravings. Or tonight I want to work on improving my communication with my wife. Or tonight I want to work on developing more of an action plan so that I stay clean and sober. So you talk about what you want to work on. And after everybody in the group actually goes through their check-in, identifying their feelings, talking about their week, and then identifying what they want to work on, we usually have a group exercise. And, what we've been doing in our group has been doing what we call the timeline exercise, and that is where you identify different traumas that have occurred in the first 17 years of your life. And they may be sexual in nature, or they just may be life situations. Some of our participants have talked about medical problems they've had, or developmental issues, stuttering or thumb sucking or bedwetting or different issues that interfere with the normal development. And then, unfortunately, most of the men in our sexual addictions groups do a lot of talking about trauma that's occurred. They've witnessed abuse. I had one man today who said, it is more painful as a child to watch my brothers and sisters be abused verbally and physically than it is for me to go through the abuse myself. And I absolutely agree that for a lot of people to witness abuse and to feel so helpless like they can't prevent it is worse than actually going through the abuse yourself. And so on that timeline, they're talking about important events that have occurred that have shaped or molded their lives. They've talked about highlights that have occurred so that we know when people got awards or were nominated for things or, got their first car or got their first solo performance in a play. And then we talk about people that have been through really difficult situations. And when I say that, I mean, clients that have seen their mother have miscarriages, or clients who witnessed their father having an affair with the neighbor, or clients who have witnessed their parents getting in a fight and a father's suicide attempt afterwards. This kind of trauma happens, and it creates what we call a maladaptive desire to cope through self-soothing. And when that occurs, there's just no doubt that some of those maladaptive coping skills will repeat themselves over and over and over and over again, and they will become crucial to a person's ability to self-soothe. And when they're maladaptive, of course, it makes it very, very difficult, because then they're actually self-soothing by doing something that is auto-exacerbating. And that means that it actually makes them feel worse after they've done the self-soothing than prior to. Now, let me just explain that in very simple terms. Let's just take a 300-pound woman, and she's a compulsive overeater. And so she finds out she doesn't get a job. And as a result, she opens up a huge cherry cheesecake. And she eats 3 pieces just to self-medicate the sadness and the loneliness and the rejection. Well, after she eats those 3 pieces of cherry cheesecake, she has a lot of self-loathing. She hates herself for that behavior. She hates herself for that lack of self-discipline. And she feels miserable. So she feels miserable, she gets depressed, she hates herself, and guess what she does? She eats more cherry cheesecake because she wants the self-loathing to go away. Now, to the normal person, you'd go, well, why is she continuing to do, that she's participating in behaviors that absolutely make her feel worse? Well, they're maladaptive. For the moment, they make her feel better. But then they become auto-exacerbating, because then she feels worse than before she ate them. And then she does it again and again and again. And that's why people who have promised not to seek prostitution, when they get stressed or get hurt or feel rejected, they go straight to that special street in the inner city and pick up a prostitute and self-medicate with anonymous sex. And then after the anonymous sex, what do? They feel worse about themselves. They hate themselves. They swear they're never going to do it again. And before the night is even over, they're contacting another prostitute to self-medicate again. Auto-exacerbation it's a horrible thing. And whenever you have a process addiction, you almost always have that cycle of auto-exacerbation. So, okay, we're looking at those timelines, and we're looking to see, is there something called trauma reenactment? And we've talked about this before. Is there something that, as a young child, you are doing, as a young child, something is done to you, that then, as an adult, you repeat the process, but it may be different. This is why so oftentimes child molesters have been molested as kids. They hated being molested, but then it somehow turned into a compulsion, and they found that they needed to do that to somebody else, which then makes them hate themselves, which makes them want to self-soothe further. And trauma reenactment has occurred. We were talking with one of my clients from the past, and, she did witness her father suiciding because her mother had gone out on him. And now she's a sex addict, and she is engaging in sex with maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 people a day, much to her husband's dismay. And she knows that what she's creating is trauma reenactment, but she's been unable to stop the behavior. And I just pretty much told her this week, I cannot continue to work with you unless you get into a 12-step program, because what I am doing is not enough, and I will not continue to enable the behavior with you saying, well, I got counseling, when that's only the tip of the iceberg. You need an entire program of recovery. Now, this woman has worked hard. She's been in 3 different treatment centers. But guess what? Her trauma is so great, she may need 6. This is not easy work. It doesn't resolve itself in 10 sessions or less. It takes 3 to 5 years of hard, disciplined work to get better. And, that's what is so important to know, that it isn't something that you're going to cure in 3 months. It is something that you really need to attend to diligently. Okay, now another exercise that we have done in group that has been very helpful with, including the timeline, is called the anger letter. And almost everybody in their childhood can identify at least one thing that they have been very, very angry about. Maybe they were molested. Maybe their parents divorced. Maybe their best friend moved away. Maybe their animal got run over by an alcoholic uncle. Maybe they were put down in school. Maybe they were bullied for being different, for being African American or Indian. So what I ask the men to do is to identify one trauma that's occurred in their life and to write 2 different letters. The first letter is the civil, I am so angry that this happened to me letter. If there's a perpetrator, it would look more like, I'm so angry that you did this to me, and here's how you ruined my life, and this is how my life has had to be different. And typically that's anywhere from 3 paragraphs to 3 pages long. We call it the civil letter because it's really an explanation of how that person has affected you. But then the next letter they get to write is the venomous, angry, ugly letter. It is the letter by which you can say anything you want to your perpetrator, or you can say anything you want to your parents. How dare you get a flipping divorce? I hate you for doing that. You're nothing but selfish assholes. And you go on and on and on, and you get as ugly as you need to get. And you just get all the venom out. It's actually, I call it the venomous letter, because it's like poison. You just want to externalize all the rage and the anger and the hatred that you have. And you may say, well, why? Why would you want a client to get in touch with all that anger? That's not healthy. But in actuality, it can be healthy, because when you externalize anger, you're more likely to be able to let it go, especially if then we promote ways of letting the anger go. For instance, we've had men in our groups that have buried the anger. Literally, we've all gone out. They found a place to bury their letter, and they buried it, or burnt it, or cut it up, or flushed it down the toilet. This is not necessarily an angry letter that you give to somebody. Instead, you come to the group and you read the letter out loud. You externalize it. You get it out on paper, and you are validated by the other group members. And boy, here's the beauty of a group. When you are in a group and somebody does their work, it always touches you too. Even if you didn't have the same experiences, even if you did not undergo the same trauma, it is amazing how much work you can do when you watch another man do his work. And so I have right now a man who he was molested by his uncle. And his uncle is still alive. As a matter of fact, his uncle participated in a bar mitzvah for his son. Now, I know you're thinking, well, that sounds pretty crazy. Why wouldn't that man be ostracized from the family? But unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to handle conflict, and they don't know good boundary setting, and so they kind of ignore their feelings and they ignore boundaries. And then all of a sudden, the family celebration entails including the perpetrator there. So this man has written 2 letters, and he is reading it to the group. And then what we may do is, based on a real understanding of what this man's gone through, we may do something called a psychodrama, where this man actually picks people in the group and positions them in the room very similarly to the positions that his family happened to be in his own life. You know, that may look for something like maybe the father. Well, one of the things we talked about today is that a lot of times dads were good men, but they weren't really present in the family. And if that's the case, maybe we'd put the father in the furthest corner of the room, facing away from everybody else, maybe doing his job. And that would be the father's positioning. And maybe we'd have a raging, histrionic mother who cried all the time, who was very isolated and angry that she didn't have any help. And the group member would position the mother in such a way as to show her sadness, her depression, or her anger. And then maybe we'd have a little brother or a sister who got lots of attention for dance or basketball or being the good child. And again, my client would position that sibling in a way. Maybe he'd put the sibling on the mother's lap or at the mother's knees or dancing for the mother. And the psychodrama does something to the brain. It allows the brain to view the family from a different perspective and to, again, get validation from the group. It's a very powerful process whereby you actually get to enact what's occurred in your family. And I know it probably sounds to you like it would not have much impact on a person, but in actuality, it really does. So those are some of the exercises that we might do in group. The more experiential, the better. And, these guys would never have believed that they're participating in a group like this. But what they're doing before, during, and after the group is they're processing more about themselves. Now the guys go out for dinner after every group. Not everybody joins. We all have different obligations, but the group gets together after group and they go to a restaurant and they just kind of shoot the shit and they process what they learned in group, and they probably critique my style and sometimes I know that that's where conflict occurs. They might be mad at me because I pushed somebody a little too hard or I didn't get something, and that's absolutely fine with me as long as they bring it back to me the next week and share their feelings. What I've learned to do is not take conflict personally, to learn from it, but not to take it personally at all. But again, the impact of a group, there's so much synergy and power in a multitude of people that I can't speak highly enough for group therapy and what it can do when you've really been traumatized. And what I hope to be doing in the next, I'd say year, is to write a manual on group work for sexual addiction. There aren't enough books out there, and I love being able to help others to do good group therapy. And I feel, I'm just now starting myself, but I've run over 2,000 groups in general, not all sexual addictions groups. So, there's something I really get from group therapy. Okay, well, we just have a few more minutes. Again, this is your time to call me. That's right, Carol the Coach, at 646-595-3284. I would encourage you to make the best use of this time. I just checked my statistics and saw where I have over 8,000 listeners, so I know you're out there. But if you, again, are a little shy, you can always email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com or check out my website at www.sexhelpwithcarolthecoach. And listen, if you've done some good work, if you've done some exercises, if you have something that you think would help other listeners or readers, you can submit your entries, and I will put them on my website, anonymously, of course. I believe that we're all here to help each other, and that is what counts most. Now, I would encourage you to really read about the subject. If you're listening to me, there's probably a need for you to do some more reading. If you don't have a 12-step group in your area, and of course you can look up SAA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, and see if there is a group in your area. But if you don't, there are groups that you can become a part of through telemeetings. They're telephone meetings, and they're people all over the world that aren't lucky enough to live in a city where there are SAA meetings. So there's just no excuse not for you to get any help. And if you're looking for a certified sexual addictions therapist, go to www.sexhelp.com and put in the state or country and see what comes up for you. All right, well, we thank you for letting me educate you about groups tonight. And again, we have John and Elaine Leadham, who will be talking with us next week about couples recovery. They wrote One in the Spirit, A Couple's Guide to Meditation and Recovery, and they're just a fabulous couple that not only have great insight, but they've worked their program. And as I say to all of you at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times, so I fearlessly want you to have the courage to be yourself, to work on yourself, and to know that there are people out there to help you, that understand and actually can help you be accountable to changing your life. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, for more sex help with Carol the Coach.